Hello, this is Chris Goldthorpe with chesseducator.co, and this is a short video on a slightly higher level aimed at players over 1600 who still play this opening. So for a number of reasons you might consider it moot, but we'll look at it anyway because it came up in a discussion with some pretty strong players. Of course, you could play d4 for a first move, but a lot of games between amateur players start with these moves that we see on the board here: 1 e4 e5, 2 knight f3 knight c6, and of course when grandmasters play we almost always see the Ruy Lopez here. I know Gary Kasparov played the Scotch game a few times. There's some other moves here that are relatively harmless among strong players, but nevertheless among weaker players white could play them anyway. Um, but bishop c4 is pretty common in games between kids. So, in John M's book, Play the Open Game as Black, he recommends knight f6 to just play the two knights defense, which is not a bad idea. It's a perfectly good move as long as you're ready for the knight g5 variation. Um, However, bishop e7 is playable and bishop c5 is a common choice. So far this is not too moot an issue. Now, a lot of the players playing scholastic chess who are strong enough to even benefit from the following discussion might be people who play the Evans Gambit if they don't play the Ruy Lopez. And there is sort of a way, as you'll see coming up, if black hasn't played the two knights defense, to just play this in a more positional way. White can just play b4 here and then later d3, bring his bishop back b3 to c2 and play it just like a Ruy Lopez. In other words, in a positional way where although white's queen side develops slowly, he has a very solid e-pawn and no wild tactics that can allow the lower rated player to pull a trick on you. However, this has been a popular move here. And when black takes, which he should, there are those who feel that the Max Lang attack is a better choice. If you're the black pieces and you play up to this point, you need to be ready for the Max Lang attack. However, this is a perfectly good move as well. Here, black would need to do this move. And, I mean, to be honest, the Krakow variation, nobody's really interested in that anymore. Bishop to d2 might actually be the best choice here. But we're speculating. And if it's two, say, 1800 level players playing, it's not going to make a whole lot of difference what the best move is here. What's going to matter is who makes the blunders in the middle game that comes after this. But be that as it may, I think bishop d2 is white's theoretically strongest choice. Black can't really waste time, and so black would be trading bishops here, and then I would recommend for white to come up here and do this. So for that reason, knight c3 might be seen as a little bit obsolete these days. White naturally should play this as a gambit. The old d5 move is not that great. It's probably better than it turned up in the game between Steinitz and von Bartheleben, which people love to show, where black played that badly afterward. But knight takes e4 is the move I would recommend for black. The only thing that white should do here is to castle immediately. And knight to c3 is not an entirely mistaken move. We can look in our database here and see knight c3 has been played a few times. Now it's only been played 6 times in here, um, and white seems to have won 5 out of 6 of those times, but I would be interested to see if it is because black plays a blunder after knight takes knight. Because on knight takes knight and pawn takes, really the best move for black is to play d5, and that's a perfectly playable line for black. And although the database shows white winning 75%, it shows it like plus about a half pawn. Anything less than about a half pawn is it's questionable whether or not the engine is really giving you good advice when it's that close. So, going back a move, if black doesn't play that and takes the pawn, yes, this is definitely an error. And you can see that the engine takes a little while to realize that. Now at first it's just showing this idea of just taking at f7 immediately. In this position, I would maintain that bishop a3 is the strongest move. Now when this just looks at it for a short period of time, it often has queen b3 in first place for a while, and then after it continues to look for a while, it ends up settling on bishop to a3, and the difference in the two evaluations just keeps going up as we go forward. Might not be a big difference. It's very difficult for black to play either way, so if you're looking at this as black, differentiating between queen b3 or bishop to a3 is not really important at all, because all you need to really know is don't take the pawn at c3. So if you do, the best move for white is bishop a3, but I'm going to come back to that. I'm going to show you a blindfold game that I played in high school from a blindfold simul, where I went here and then I asked to take the move back because I knew my opponent would say no and think that I had overlooked taking the rook. So he takes the rook right away, which is actually not his best move. Better for black here is actually to play d5, snubbing this bishop. But even this turns out to be like about 0.6 for white, plus 0.6. Now, could we be expected to know that in a game? I don't know. It's doubtful. Look at white's pawns. I mean, he's 2 pawns down. We're pretty close to the beginning of the game. I don't see a lot of 1700 players coming up with that d5 move. It's probably pretty rare. If you were knowledgeable enough to know that move, you'd probably be knowledgeable enough not to take the pawn at c3. But be that as it may, yeah, looks like we're still at about plus 0.6 with this variation. And if we follow it along here, white's got a lot of open space. The computer thinks this is about plus 0.6. I'd be interested to see how this works between real humans of the rating range that would be playing this sort of opening, because the stronger players would likely be playing either a Sicilian or a Ruy Lopez or d4 or something. So let's go back to the queen b3 move. And the way it worked out in my high school blindfold simul is, then I took here and black goes there. Of course, you see that if he goes to e7, he gets skewered. I'm not mentioning these things as much because this video is aimed at a higher level of player. Bishop g5, and often when black sees this position for the first time, he says, oh my god, my queen, and makes the only move he sees to change his, to guard his queen. However, knight takes d4 is better. Again, maybe this doesn't really matter. If white tries to go to b4 check to win the knight, because he has both the knight and the bishop attacking it, that won't be so difficult for black to deal with. He'll play c5, and black is completely winning. If white takes this, he'll attack the black queen again. Now his bishop is getting loose. The queen can get away. If he were to take the queen, things get even worse for him. Watch the evaluation change considerably, right? That's check. And then white's king side is thoroughly messed up, and then he takes the queen, and still his bishops are going to be hanging. So either way, this should be winning for white, but not if white makes that queen b4 move there. It is definitely true that queen a3 check is better, but it is not true that, oh, you just win the queen here. So king takes the bishop, we take the queen. Black, whose knight is guarded by his bishop, takes the other bishop. Knight checks. King goes here, attacking the knight. The rook takes the bishop, and this rook moves back to e8. You might wonder, well, why did he not take the knight with his king? But I think you can find the answer to that. So here he gives him another check. The king goes here, and then we'll check him in a way that preserves the knight. Black puts his knight in the way. We can go here. Of course, if this pawn on d7 doesn't move, I'll take the black knight as soon as he takes my knight. But this is still winning for white. It's not that it's not winning for white with queen a3. It's just that queen a3 is making the best of a good situation that's not quite as good as the bishop a3 move. So like I say, if you're studying this for the black pieces, it's all moot, because you shouldn't take the pawn here on c3 anyway. Yeah, black would do better here to play d5. But if he has taken, let's take a look at the other move, bishop a3. And once again, black does well to pitch this d-pawn just to give his pieces some freedom. And white, of course, he's better off to not take it. And then this way he's about plus 0.6 for now. Let's see how it climbs. Yeah, it's about the same. So it would be difficult for anybody to make a convincing case that queen to b3 or bishop to a3 was better or more relevant. And the whole issue is a little bit moot, as strong players will play the Ruy Lopez. If they play the Giucco, they'll probably play the d3 type line, or if they really want action, they'll play the Evans Gambit. Nothing wrong with playing the Giucco piano, especially if you play it in the more positional way. However, the Moeller attack, it is pretty easy for black to get a an advantage if he knows what's going on. Um, just to visit the main line a little bit, and I have some controversy on what the main line really is because I personally have done a lot of research on the computer and in databases for this opening. So I am not a grandmaster, but I think I know this opening pretty well. And knight c3 actually not best. The main line on knight c3 runs takes castles. Actually, how did I get there? Takes castles, and the real main line I would consider to be here. Now white must make this move. If he just takes the bishop, black plays d5, and black is better. Joel Benjamin says this is the safe choice. And it is. Knight e5 has always been thought to be a horrible disaster of a move. And queen e2 is actually best. I had a game that went like this. In the whole game, you can find this entire game in Max Erver's Judgment and Planning in Chess, right to the very last move. So I don't get any credit whatsoever here. They always thought that black can't preserve his knights. They always had him playing f5. But if you do enough research, I think you'll find that black can play that knight d5 move, or knight e5 move here. After this, knight e5. I think that really should be called the main line for black. However, these days everybody likes the bishop f6 line. And it is a mistake for white to take this knight here. I mean, black can just take back like this. This wins nothing because he just castles, and if you take the knight, d5. So taking the knight is a mistake there. Yeah, that's a mistake. What white should do, if he didn't play queen e2 here, is play rook e1, which I think is best. Black knight comes back. White comes up and takes this. He goes here. Bishop comes out. Takes, and before 1963, black would castle, and we would get this sort of thing. And black ends up having to do a perpetual check to avoid being checkmated, but it would wind quickly into a draw. So around the early 60s, black would castle and they shake hands. So if you're looking for a win, that's not so good. But sometimes black is even looking for a win. I would think that strong players might play their favorite non-open game opening, like maybe a Sicilian or something, if they want to win as black. But Portish came up with this move, and it really does result in an ugly position for black, but one in which he is winning. This is not really sufficient, and black can go here. And if he backs up, I would have suggested this move, but rook e2 is very strong. He's got to do something like this already. Of course, he can't take the knight with his pawn. But white is not winning too much. Still, black has an ugly position, doesn't he? But h5 is not white's best try. Queen e2 is, and then black will typically, then he'll take this knight. That might not be his best move. This may be better, so that the bishop can come guard the king side quickly. So, often played here is the pawn takes knight move. And then, of course, white would go here. Andy Soltis has a book about this opening. Black is going to lose a piece now. White's going to get his piece back, but he doesn't have to take it right away. Black goes here with the idea of keeping the e-file closed. Might be interesting to examine the sacrifice of the rook for the bishop and the pawn, but I imagine people think of things like that, and if it were good, Soltis's book that examined this position already would have mentioned that, and it doesn't seem to. The normal move they show is this, and then this, and now this strange move, because the rook wants to get to the h-file and h4 won't do because of the pawn. Now, if black makes this move immediately, that's not really good. White has a strong move. I'm waiting for the engine to agree with me, or else I'm wrong. Because it's showing rook h3 is still, everything here is better for black. So as you can see, this bishop f6 is really a safer variation, apparently. Rook h3, rook takes, pawn takes. I hope you see white's threat. He surely cannot take the bishop and live. But he goes here to stop the queen check. And now queen f3, and things are kind of equal, a little better for black. So really the whole Moeller variation is now defunct among strong players. No one's going to play it as white, at least not the Moeller variation. You might see the bishop to d2. Even with the bishop to d2 variation, with the best moves, white's got an isolated pawn, and I think not enough compensation for that. So that's why I would just play the Ruy Lopez if I were going to play something similar to that. Or if I were playing the Giucco piano, I would go with the d3 and then try to get the bishop to b3 and then c2. Play it positionally like a Ruy Lopez. But hopefully I've answered some of the sticky questions about the tactics surrounding winning a pawn at c3. And this is the Chess Educator at chesseducator.co. Thanks for listening. Bye.